Welcome to High Sobriety. Our goal is to save lives and remove the stigma of addiction. Here's the host of High Sobriety, John Mabry.
Hi, you're listening to Addiction Campuses podcast, High Sobriety. I'm honored to be your grateful recovering host today as we talk with Arlina Allen. Now, Arlina, she's not an A-list celebrity and she's not an established political figure, but what she is an everyday superhero with an immense amount of experience, strength, and hope that we can all learn from to better understand alcoholism and addiction in ourselves or a loved one. You might even hear that one piece of advice or encouragement from Arlina today that will help you get sober or help you better understand what a loved one is going through. You might even hear that one piece of advice or encouragement from Arlina that will help you stay sober today or help you better understand why a loved one continues to engage in active alcoholism or addiction. So Arlina, welcome to High Sobriety. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Well, listen, it's such an honor to be able to be on your podcast today and hopefully share some experience, strength, and hope that maybe somebody else might be able to, not feel so alone and feel connected in their recovery.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to say on a personal level, we have some, we try to get higher profile folks, on the show. It helps out with ratings and with, downloads and views and all that. But these are the kind of interviews that I really get, I wouldn't say more nervous about or anxious about, but that I appreciate more and that I'm really honored to get to do. Just as somebody who is doing the deal, who's been doing the deal for a lot of years. Are you at 24 years sober now?
I am. April 23rd was 24 years, and I can hardly believe that's my number, but there you have it.
I mean, good Lord, that's amazing. I mean, what a feat. And so I would love to, we're going to dive in a little bit of how you've done it. But I'll just go ahead and say, I think how you did it is doing it one day at a time, and that's the name of your podcast. So Arlina also has a podcast called the ODAT Chat Podcast, and ODAT stands for One Day at a Time. And so she's also Arlina's been married for 20 years and is a mother of 2 children. How old are your kids?
My oldest just turned 18, which is kind of heartbreaking in some ways. And my younger son is 14.
Cool. Oh, gosh. Trouble.
Yeah. You know what? I got to say, I have good boys. And I think it's because, number one, I've been sober the whole time, and my husband is also in recovery, and they take after their daddy. So there's that.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just dive in. You started struggling. You had career aspirations that eventually led you to struggling with alcohol. I think that's probably a very common theme, a very common thing for folks that coming out of college, you're 25 years old and you got these big career aspirations and not probably expecting it to happen. Next thing you know, you're turning to alcohol more and more to cope with life. So describe to us, a little bit how you grew up, some background info, and then kind of how you got into the trouble that you got in, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So, yeah, like what you said was true, right? Alcohol really started to become a problem, when I was in my early 20s. But it started, I actually had my first drink, believe it or not, at probably around 10 years old. And this wasn't learned behavior. Neither one of my parents drank. My mother's from Mexico City and daddy's from Kentucky. And neither one of them drank. On my father, there's like 400 years of ministers on my father's side. And, he's like Mr. Uber Christian. We used to joke around that he was so heavenly minded, he was of no earthly good. But I know, it's kind of mean. My dad is like the nicest guy ever, but not exactly. Like, he didn't have any kind of struggles the way I did. And certainly my mother didn't either. My parents are just super straight. Very nice, hardworking, middle-class people. They divorced when I was about 7. And, it was really hard on me. And there were some other things that happened to me. I was molested when I was really young, and that really kind of, it had a profound effect on me that I wasn't able to recognize or identify until much later in life. And I've heard it said that trauma is not for everyone, but trauma is like at the root of addiction and compulsive behaviors. And for me, that was the case, right? And then my parents divorcing, I thought that I had this belief that I wasn't good, and at some point I decided that if I couldn't be good, I was going to be good at being bad. And that's kind of how I was able to live with myself, really, and to turn everything into a joke. There were some things that happened when I was drinking that wasn't very ladylike. I used to, and let me just tell you about the first time I got drunk, because that kind of set the theme for my entire drinking career.
I want to make sure we get back to that unladylike stuff, so don't skip over that.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the funny part, right? It's like, what is that saying, that tragedy plus time equals comedy? So I will be sure to circle back, because that's kind of fun now that it's over. But yeah, when I was 10 years old, so my mother had gone out on a date, or she went out for the evening, and I have an older sister who's almost 2 years older than me, also very straight. She was the good child, right? You had the good child and then me. And so Mom went out. For whatever reason, I decided that I was going to drink some of the booze. There was like this dusty old bottle nobody ever drank. I'm assuming somebody left it in my mom's cabinet after a party or something. But so I decided it would be a good idea to drink some. And so I remember, pouring a drink. And I remember the alcohol burning my lips and burning all the way down. But when it hit bottom, the warmth spread through my whole body, and suddenly I felt good. And I hadn't realized how bad I felt until I felt really good. It was like the juxtaposition between those two feelings was suddenly so apparent that, it set me on a new high. I had never felt like that before. And, the evening didn't end well. I got sick and threw up everywhere, and my older sister cleaned me up and put me to bed. And that sort of started our alcoholic codependent relationship from that point on. And I had asked her many years later, why didn't you say anything to Mom? And she said, because I was going to get in trouble for your behavior.
She was watching out for herself.
Right. And I thought that was really interesting. It wasn't until much later, until I got into recovery, that was sort of the theme of our household, is that I didn't take responsibility for my behavior, and I was taking inappropriate responsibility for other people's behavior. Like, I thought I was responsible for my sister, and she thought she was responsible for me. Mm-hmm. And so sorting that all out years later was, it was part of the miracle of recovery, is, doing a 4-step and finding out what's yours and what's not, and, what your part is. And that was all a very amazing process. But from the first time that I drank to the last time I drank, I had my last drink on my 21st birthday at this bar out here in San Jose called the Saddle Rack. It was this huge country bar with like a tequila barber chair and a mechanical bull, and there was like 3 dance floors. It was like Disneyland for a country wannabe like me. So that was my favorite playground. But I had my last drink on my 25th birthday. But the time between the first one and the last one was a series of what I'd like to call episodes. And this is kind of where the fun, not so fun, bad behavior comes from. And, I used to say, I was just, I thought of myself as the party girl, right? When you're young, and that seems to be like, oh, that's all it is, right? Like, I was just the party girl. I used to say, but I used to throw up a lot too, because I would drink so much. I'm 5'3", like 110 pounds at the time. And, but I could drink just about anybody under the table, men 3 times my size. It was like my badge of honor. But yeah. I used to say that, if I didn't have splash marks on my shoes, it wasn't a good time, which is super ladylike. But that's kind of just how I got through times like that. Is I tried to use humor to sort of mask how embarrassed and humiliated I was the next day. And, I would do things like I would wake up and open my eyes and I would be like, oh, my God, that's not my ceiling. Nothing worse.
What ceiling is this?
I know, like, oh, dear Jesus, where am I? Lots of blacking out and lots of Sunday morning introductions. I like to say.
Hi, I'm Arlina.
Like, oh, hi, who are you? super fun. Drugs and alcohol are a big part of my story, but also, looking for love in all the wrong places, just trying to seek, it's funny. I used to think that if I had enough money and the right man, if I could just fall in love, my life would be perfect, right? And the truth is, I wasn't that far off. It was love that saved me in the end, but it didn't come in the way I expected it to. I thought, I don't know, I guess I bought into like the sort of Cinderella story that if I fell in love and Prince Charming would come along, he would rescue me from myself and that I could live happily ever after. But the problem was, it's like, and I didn't know this at the time, but water seeks its own level. And so the kind of person I was attracting my equal opposite, and which was super unhealthy, right? So all these things you find out later, it's like, gosh, it would have been nice to know all that ahead of time.
I know. I wish there was like a manual. Yeah, I wish they had like a manual before you go through all the bad stuff to go, oh, that's why I did that. And
well, the funny thing is I have discovered, and I bet you have too, haven't you discovered that there's like so many amazing books that address all this stuff? But I just didn't know I needed it, right? I didn't know what I needed. So it wasn't until, that old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Mm-hmm. So it's like when maybe I needed the information, but it wasn't until I started asking the questions that I got the answers, right? Mm-hmm. And so fast forward through all the drama, what I called, I'd have these, what's funny is that when I drank, I could never predict how I was going to behave. I had like these two alter egos. It was either Badass Betsy or Wimpy Wendy, because I was either fighting or crying, it seemed like. I just could never predict who was going to come out once I started drinking. And I don't know, it was just sort of a crazy, and I was like, I don't want to be this way, but I didn't know how not to be that way. So, I got sober because I never got arrested, or I was never fired from a job like directly because of my drinking and using, but my life completely was falling apart. My mom and my sister really didn't want much to do with me. My dad was super sweet, but even he was getting tired of my shenanigans, and I didn't have very many girlfriends left. I had like a couple of drinking buddies that I would go to bars with, because it looks really bad if you show up to a bar alone. And I guess they were just as sick as I was and needed a wingman.
Yeah, they were glad to have you in their life. Like, oh, good, I don't have to go by myself.
Yeah, I mean, we fulfilled a sick need for each other, right? And but I remember one day I had this one girlfriend. Her name is Andy, and one morning she looked at me and she's like, I don't know, I don't remember what happened the night before, but we got into an argument, or I did something really crazy, and she looked at me and she's like, you need to get some help. And I was so offended. I was like, you crazy bitch, who are you to tell me I need help? Because she was drinking with me every step of the way, right? Mm-hmm. And but I knew in my heart that she was right. And, I had grown up in the church, but I didn't feel like, I felt so guilty because I couldn't be good. And I had abandoned God because he didn't fix me. And but I reached that moment of surrender where I was like, something has to change and I need help. Because I was an outside sales rep for this transportation company, and I was reading all these I lived in this self-help section of Barnes & Noble. I was really seeking the answers. And I did Tony Robbins and Harvey Mackey, and I was like, reading all the books, but what I didn't know until later is that I was trying to live my way into right thinking. And it wasn't until I got sober and got into a 12-step program that they taught me that recovery is about living your way into right thinking. I had it backwards.
And say those again.
Which was,
say those again. You had you tried to.
I tried to think my way into right living.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I thought if I could read enough books that I really was looking for the answer, but I wasn't connected to this fact that life was about cause and effect, right? And I couldn't see my part. I saw myself as a victim.
Yeah, something else on the outside is making me do this. It's not me.
Yeah, and which is interesting, right? And I don't know if this has been your experience, but my thinking is about 180 degrees away from the solution. And I'll give you a little example. When I finally got into the program, and I'll try. Don't let me forget. I'll tell you how I got to the program. But when I got there, I was. Sorry, I have so many things I want to say. You ever had that feeling where it's like everything just comes rushing in, and it's like, oh, which way do I go? But let's see. So it wasn't until I got sober that they told me about cause and effect, right? That I was the cause. I was actually the cause of my problems, not at the effect of them. That everything I did carried a consequence, and I was actually living in the residual of my decisions from yesterday or the day before, right? We're in constant, it's like the decisions we made yesterday, we're living in the residual of those decisions today. But I couldn't see that I had any part in it. I just thought I was a victim and everything was, their fault. And it was life, this big vague thing was not on my side, And it was funny because when they showed up to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was completely self-centered, but totally incapable of self-examination. And I finally got the process of, my way isn't working, right? If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're expecting a different result. That's insanity. That I needed to try to do something different. And I needed to come up with better questions, not instead of why am I a victim? It's like, what can I do different? How can I take better care of myself? Who's winning? Who's winning life? What are they doing? So it was just a whole process of changing the way I think, basically. And, would it be helpful, do you think, if I track back a little bit and talk about how I got sober?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but...
no, you're good.
The way I got sober is I was an outside sales rep for this transportation company, and I had a really nice apartment, and back in the day, I had a pager, which made me super fancy. And I was the only girl I knew who had a cell phone. And let me just describe the cell phone to you because this is so funny. So the cell phone was in it was like, remember the old school phones that you hung on the wall that had like the curly cord?
Oh, yeah.
It was kind of like that, but it carried with it this battery pack that was like 15 pounds. I'm not even kidding.
My dad
it was like
had one.
Your dad had one. Yeah, your dad was a baller back in the day,
He
right?
was, yes. That was fancy. Take it in and out of the car to the house and lug it around.
Oh, yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, I was, you're hot shit 24 years ago if you have a cell phone.
Heck yeah, that's bragging rights there. Take it into the bar with you. Hey guys, check this out. I got a phone.
I know, right? It's like the cell phone in one hand and the battery pack in the other. I was like, hey. Yeah, so that was super fun. So I thought I was kind of a badass, but my life on the inside was completely falling apart. I had managed to hold this guy hostage. I labeled him my boyfriend, and I was starting to really fail at my sales job. I started out making a bunch of money, and I had this fancy apartment, but it was all starting to unravel. And I had 2 customers that were in the program, and I didn't know it, Mitch and Randy, and super awesome guys, fine, upstanding members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And these 2 guys carried the message to me. Randy was like, he explained things to me like, like I said about the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. And he kind of broke down the first 3 steps for me, the powerlessness and unmanageability. He was the one that pointed out that if you can't predict your behavior, that when you start drinking, that might be a problem. The insanity, and then, turning your will and your life over to a power greater than yourself. And I was actually at a meeting this morning where this lady was talking about how if you have a problem with God, you actually have a problem with someone else's definition of God. And I love that, because I was able to unravel my concept of God and sort of cut away what wasn't mine and develop a new definition that made sense to me, which was amazing. And Mitch took me to my very first meeting, and he was the one that was like, you know what? The women work with the women and the men work with the men. And I'm so grateful that those guys told me those things. They brought me in and then they turned me over to the women, which was so frightening because I had spent so much time and energy decorating the outside that I felt like I had nothing on the inside. I was petrified of these women, but I was so desperate and willing to be different. I wanted to be different my entire life. I never liked who I was. So when they said I had to change everything, I was like, sign me up, because there isn't anything that I want to keep, to be honest. But they told me I had to work with the women, and I was terrified because to me, women were competition. They weren't a source of support, right?
Yeah, you're finding that in guys, or trying to look for that in men.
Exactly.
That was your comfort zone.
Yeah,
They'll make me feel better. The Prince Charming's going to help me. And then the women were like, oh, well, I'm competing against that little bitty.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow. So that's really scary.
Yeah, it was super scary. I mean, men are easy to manipulate. I mean, they see boobs and then they lose all train of thought. It's very easy to manipulate. But women, they don't care. Mm-hmm. They don't care about any of that. They have the same superpower I did, so they were not impressed. But I was so scared and desperate that I didn't want to drink anymore. And I kept hearing about this ominous 4-step that people would do, steps 1, 2, and 3, and then they'd relapse. And I was terrified that I would relapse. So they said I needed to get a sponsor and start working steps and get over this 4-step. So I was on the lookout, and I chose my first sponsor because she remembered my name the second time she met me. And I was so impressed with her. And I had, how I asked her to be my sponsor is I asked her if she would listen to my 4-step. And do you know, she's so sweet. She said, she looked me in the eye and she said, I would be honored. And it just melted me because I would tell my business to anybody who would stand still long enough. I mean, I don't know why I was doing that, but I could see it in her eyes that she got my kind of crazy and she didn't judge me for it. And she saw me for who I was and she loved me anyway. And that sort of concept, loving somebody like that we're perfectly imperfect, that idea has carried me through 24 years. She and I met every week, and I attacked the 4-step the same way I attacked seeking those outside things that I thought were going to fix me, the drugs, the alcohol, the men, the shopping, the whatever, right? So she and I met every week. The 12-step process is largely a writing process in my experience. And I went to a lot of meetings. I did the 90 meetings in 90 days. I got my sponsor. I started working the steps. And I was amazed before I was halfway through. And by the time I got to the inventory, I was able to, it's kind of a great, you get to, what I loved about the beginning part was I got to write down all my resentments. So that was like my license to complain and vent and say everything I needed to say. But really, it was about getting very specific about the cause. I got very specific and I never did that before. When I was growing up, me and my mom would get into an argument. You know, we'd start out arguing about one thing, and then she'd bring up 10 other things, and pretty soon we had multiple things on the table, and I didn't know what we were fighting about anymore. So this was a very clean process to be able to list all the things out, identify how it affected me. And I got to tell you, my self-esteem was taking hit after hit after hit. It's like, well, no wonder I felt so bad about myself, you know? And then finally, when we got to my part, a pattern started to emerge. And that's where I realized I was taking inappropriate responsibility for others. I was like, if I could just control you so that you would act right and then I would feel better, you know, it was all about me after a while. Always, actually. Then I realized that I wasn't taking responsibility for myself in many ways, financially. I was not able to ask for what I wanted. I didn't even know what I wanted, to be honest. I had spent so much time disconnecting from my feelings that a feeling would arise and I wouldn't even know what it was. And I don't know, have you guys ever seen those old school pictures of a switchboard operator?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, so there's like a lady sitting in front of a switchboard and she's got all these plugs and there's all these holes. And it's like, that's how I felt. I felt like all the cords were in my hand. I'm like, I don't know what this feeling is, because I know angry and I know happy, and that's about it. There is maybe a few in between, confused and sad. You know, those are all like all the negative ones I was very attached to. But I wasn't really able to identify like the gray areas. So it was really interesting, going through the process of recovery. And for me, recovery is about recovering my whole self, right? You know, the good and the bad. And, I was seeing all these character defects and I was embarrassed and I felt really bad about myself. And this sweet sponsor was like, you know what? You did the best that you could with what you had. Mm-hmm. I did not learn good coping skills when I was growing up, right? I know my mom did the best she could. But, my shame was met with empathy. My shame was met with love and kindness. And that melted my heart. And it melted my defenses too. And I was able to see my character defects. And I think that was the magic, learning to rely on a higher power. For me, God works through people. I got my messages I needed through other people. And, from day 1 to day 24 plus, I still, have character defects, but I have the habits of relying on others, being vulnerable, willingness to change and see my part. I still have a sponsor. I sponsor many other girls, and I still have a spiritual practice. So, that's kind of a whole ball of wax, but it's been an amazing journey, and I'm grateful for all of it, even the bad stuff.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for taking us through your journey. I think it's important to point out that, a couple things. One that stands out is getting to the root cause. What's the root cause of some of the issues? I know that's something that we talk about a lot here on High Sobriety, that I'm a firm believer of. A lot of times it can go back to childhood stuff. And, for you going through a divorce and a molestation as a child, and then you started later on in your drinking career, you're either, really angry or really sad. And it's like, well, you had, were you angry that you were molested and sad that that parents went through a divorce, and when the drink came, you didn't know which end you're going to be on or what. So, So going back and having, encouraging folks to go back and look at stuff that happened early on in their lives and their childhood can stick with you long term. And then also doing the work, putting in the work. You just described a process of going through the steps. And for those of you, describe step 4. What's step 4 for our listeners that don't know?
Searching and fearless. Yeah, searching and fearless moral inventory, and really it's identifying, who you're resentful at, the specific cause, how it affects you, and then being able to identify your part so that you can make different choices in the future.
Yeah, and to walk through it with somebody in a loving, compassionate way. What's crazy, similar experience to you in that first time I shared my story in a 12-step meeting, they're like, hey, John, I was new in recovery, and they said, would you like to be our featured speaker on Sunday morning at the meeting? I was like, sure. We're down in the basement at this hospital near my house, and I go in, there's maybe 30 or 40 people in there, and I was maybe supposed to talk like 20 minutes, and I ended up going like 40 or 45, I don't remember, but it was just, just this rambling of, it was my first time to like kind of share openly in front of a group like that. And the meeting's over with, we adjourn, and this guy comes up to me who works at the hospital, and he goes, hey, so you're looking for a job? Why don't you send me your resume? Let me pass it along to some folks here. And I walked away just going, what the? I just disclosed the dirtiest stuff, the terrible character defects that I have, the crap I've put my family, my wife, my kids through, and this guy offers me a job? Like, what? Are you kidding me? And it was like, this
What's
is
the matter with you?
Yeah, this is a great group of folks to be around. It's, you can just be honest, and they go, okay, yeah, and I've done a lot worse. Like, man, that's all you did?
Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh, I'm not that bad.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's such a cool, way of life, and I was so terrified to walk into a room, the first time, and just did not want to, could not accept that. I was the kind of person that needed to go to that meeting. It was like, man, why didn't I go sooner? Why didn't I go sooner?
Were you sorry to interrupt you. Were you embarrassed were you afraid that you would see somebody you knew?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I don't want to see somebody around town. They're going to know. They're going to know. And now it's just like, oh my gosh, yes.
And they're there for the same reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's important to, go back and look at root causes of why you might be, using drugs or alcohol or, any other addiction, shopping or sex or anything like that. And then also you got to put in work. It didn't just like magically go away. You can't, like you tried the self-help thing. Like, let me just try to read my way out of it. Let me just try to take in more knowledge, and then it'll flush itself out. And Tony Robbins, that'll help. But you got to put in the work. You got to actually do some things and fight that. You got to go against go against the stream for a period of time, heavily to combat the just kind of going with the flow for so long. Like, let me just go with the flow, and my life is completely unmanageable. I'm gonna need to put in a little bit of work. But the great thing is you don't have to do it by yourself.
It's like what's that saying about a not worth living? And I just didn't know how to do it. Was that your experience as well? It's like you weren't really examining your own life. Yeah, exactly.
It was blaming other folks, and it was this, this happened to me, so that's why I act like this. That's why I feel entitled, because I went through a bunch of crap as a kid, and I should be able to, do what I want to do, because you don't know what I've been through. And it's real.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's pretty common, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So let me see here. What today? What are your go-to resources or daily actions that you're doing, right now today to maintain your sobriety and spiritual connection? You mentioned going to a meeting this morning, so I assume going to meetings on a regular basis is part of your routine. What else are you doing currently?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if I didn't go into it too much, my spiritual practice is really important to me. I do have a process. Like, I do spend some time in the morning. I do a little prayer meditation in the morning. Sometimes my meditation turns into a little nap, but
that's good too.
For the most part, right? Yeah. For the most part, I have it's called the 5-minute journal, which is actually, it's not meant for alcoholics or addicts. But what's great about it is that it's a short little inspirational message. It's a short gratitude list, and it's like, what would make today great, and like a daily affirmation. It sort of helps me set my intention for the day. So it's a tiny little bit of writing. And then I have a variety of like daily readers. I really like if you're just starting out in recovery, I really like the 24 hours a day book. It's like this little black book that you can get at meetings. And it's got 3 little sections, and it has like a little prayer and a thought for the day and a meditation for the day, just to get my mind right. And I was doing this morning meeting fairly regularly, but my schedule changed, so I can't go every day, but near my house, and I love this group. It's just a group of super supportive, loving, accepting people, and I know that I'm lucky over the time. I've come to recognize that not all meetings are created equal. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't found your meeting, just keep trying. Hopefully there's other meetings in your area to just keep trying until you find your people, is my point. And I know that there's lots of online groups now. That's a thing. Lots of podcasts like yours that carry the message. So just, starting my day with setting the right intention and like turning my will over, asking to being relieved of the bondage of self. It's my own negative thinking that typically sets me on the bad path. There's actually a really great book that just came out. Anna David and Joe Polish and Hal Elrod wrote this great book called Morning Miracles. It's for addicts in recovery. And, they talk about a little bit of exercise in the morning. Nutrition is really important when you first get sober. I mean, we spend a lot of years abusing our bodies, so it's important to recognize in the beginning to take good care of your physical body, and then the prayer meditation is good for your heart and your mind, your spiritual. So that's really that's a long-winded answer, but that's what I really do. And then I have my own podcast, and right now I'm sponsoring, I don't know, about between 6 and 8 girls. Sometimes I don't know who to count because some people are more self-sufficient than others. Mm-hmm. It's part of my daily routine. My husband's in recovery as well. So it's just, I created an environment where I'm constantly surrounded by messages of recovery. That's
awesome. I think it makes it easier. I have found in my experience to make it easier, because at first, when I first started going to meetings, it was like, one, I didn't want anybody to see me there. I didn't want, anybody's in the community to go, oh my
right.
gosh, well, they're there too, so they're just as screwed up as I am.
Mm-hmm.
But then to let family members or neighbors or letting folks know, around you, that it's like, man, I still kept it inside. So I'm going, and I can go be real for 1 hour a day in a room somewhere with some great people, the people I want to be around all the time, the real people. And yet I can only do that one hour a day. And then the rest of the day, I felt like I was still putting this mask on. Like I still have to go out there and not let everybody know who I really am.
Right.
And so there was just this, constant struggle going on still. And so when my wife and I finally got to the point where like, let's just start blogging about it. Let's just start telling everybody what we're doing, like what we're dealing with. And we started putting these like silly videos online, and we had a blog going, and people started coming out of the wood. We felt relief that we could just be real and honest, and then so then I found I could work into a job in a vocation, and being around this stuff more full time has been extremely helpful for me as well. And I didn't start out that way. I started out being absolutely terrified to just go to a 12-step meeting, or tell our church small group that I was struggling with alcohol. Just to get to that point, to just let a small group know, hey man, I think I'm struggling with alcohol. That was absolutely terrifying.
What was can I ask you what their response was when you told your small group at church?
It was terrible. So we had a small group at church.
What?
There was like 4 or 5 other young married couples with young kids in this room, in the living room of somebody's house, and for the first time I disclosed in front of anybody. It was the first time in front of anybody other than maybe like talking to a counselor. I was like, I think I'm struggling with alcohol, and just kind of wanted to put it out there. And the response was like crickets. And then the next thing, they didn't know what to do, because they're not used to people being real, like that real, like, oh. And so I think they were just, I caught them off guard, because my wife, like, we don't look like we're, I'm an alcoholic. I don't look like what you might think of an alcoholic. You're like, what are you talking? So the response was,
You mean you don't walk around in a trench coat with a paper bag
in my white van with no windows? Yeah.
Right.
So then they said, next thing you know, it was just quiet silence, and then you heard all right, does anybody else have any prayer requests? All right, let's close this out. And that was it. And then I was like, so that was the response from the church.
They left you hanging?
Yes. Nobody said, dude, let's talk about it. Hey, you need some accountability. Hey, are you getting some help? Hey, I mean, it was just, let's just move on to the next thing. See y'all later. And that.
They pretended like you didn't even say anything.
Yes. And this is supposed to be the church where you're supposed to be able to go about stuff like that. And so,
yeah.
It helped finding another alternative that worked for me when that wasn't working for me, and I found help in some support group rooms and continue.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you kept trying.
Yep, that's the thing. You just don't give up. You try one thing, it doesn't work, don't give up. Try another avenue. Some people aren't going to be receptive. Some people aren't going to know what to say, or they had a bad experience with a family member. Uncle screwed them over and stole a bunch of money from them because he was an alcoholic. So if you bring it up to them, they have bad. They're like, dude, get away from me. Get away from me. You're evil. So not everybody's going to meet you where you're at.
Yeah, and I'm sure this has been your experience too, because they're not bad people. They just, I think, people who don't have. I don't think they know what to say.
Yeah, exactly. I can't blame them. I wouldn't know what to say if I wasn't going through it myself. Somebody came up to me and was like, dude, I'm struggling with drugs. I'm like buying all these pain pills online and I'd be like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Go talk to somebody that does. So I can't blame them, but again, like you said, I didn't give up and I just tried another way to find some support and relief.
That you kept trying. That's amazing. Good for you.
Well, I want to see, how can people find you online? So we talked about, you got the Untitled Chat podcast. It's one day at a time. Where else can folks find you?
ODAAT. I didn't really think that through when I was picking the name of the podcast. I named it after my 6 a.m. Group that I love so much, but ODAT is ODAAT.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't really think it through because I think some people don't include the A, but whatever. Anyway, that's what that is. And then you can also find me at soberlifeschool.com. I just started creating digital products because, frankly, I just don't have the bandwidth. And like I said, I sponsor. So I have 2 teenage boys. I'm married. I have a full-time high-tech sales career. And I'm busy, and then I sponsor 8 or 9. Here's the thing. I feel like I learned a lot, and there have been times in my life, this last year, I'll just tell you this quick story because it changed my life forever. On January 4th, I got laid off from my job, and then the very next day, a girlfriend of mine passed away suddenly. She was 40 years old. She had 3 kids. She got the flu, and it turned into pneumonia, and she became septic, and she died 12 hours after being admitted to the hospital. And I mean, it's a rough way to start the year, right? And I was just devastated. But the message that I got was that life is short, and I feel like I've learned some things over my time, and it was just on my heart that I just really want to share it. I want to be able to share the information that saved me. I want to share the information that has helped me to stay married for all this time, because being married is not easy. Raising kids is hard on a marriage. I'm sure you can relate. Mm-hmm. Finances and all that stuff. I've been through a lot, and I just wanted to share it. And so I started to create these digital products, and I actually have a free worksheet that you can download at Sober Life School. It's the let me see if I can remember this, but it's how to cure isolation, and there's a 7-day challenge, and the worksheet will walk you through step by step on how to cure isolation. I feel like loneliness and isolation are things that all people in recovery, I don't care what you're addicted to, it doesn't matter what the problem is, the solution is the same. The solution is simple, the solution is spiritual, and the solution has nothing to do with the problem, right? But this worksheet is great because it's sort of a step-by-step process on how to connect to other people, like how to find your tribe, how to connect with them, exactly how to do it. I do these things called willingness calls, and every time I sponsor somebody, I ask them to do willingness calls. And a willingness call is just you find someone from the rooms or a church or whatever. You call them and say, hey, I'm just checking in. Here's a little something about what's going on with me. How are you? What's going on in your life? And then that's it. And then you just try to stay current with, a few people. And I have found that, when the shit hits the fan, I'm current with like 5 people so that I don't have to spend a lot of time going into the backstory.
Nice.
Right?
How cool.
I can just kind of get right. You just get right into solutions.
Such a practical thing. Love it. Right. Oh, I'm so glad you like it. And the worksheet, you can just download it for free. And if nothing else, I want to share that worksheet with everyone. But it's 7 days. It's amazing how in just a week everything can change, because I still do it today. I'm sober a long time. I still am me, right? And I still need people. It's like we are stronger together. It's like you're sharing your story. You're taking your time to do this podcast. It's a very noble thing that you're doing, trying to spread the message of recovery, right? We really need each other. But some of us don't know how to connect especially at first, right? So that's just what the worksheet is. You can just download the worksheet, and it's over 7 days. You have the ability to email me if you don't have any connections. Feel free to consider me your first connection. But I really just want to help everyone start getting connected, because that's how we recover, as we recover together. Absolutely. Can't do this thing alone. Dude, I love it. Just it's something that's simple and practical, not very difficult to do. That is it soberlifeschool.com? Is that where they can find that? Yep. Awesome, guys. So please go there, check that out. Again, just want to reiterate the fact that to get from where you're at to where you want to go, you have to do a little bit of work, and you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to do it alone, but you got to start somewhere. So if today's the day that you need help, whether it's finding a treatment center for yourself or a loved one, or maybe you don't need treatment, maybe you're looking for a 12-step group in your area or a counselor, call Addiction Campuses right now. Call us today. Don't wait another minute. We have treatment specialists trained to work through anything from us. We've had folks calling in suicidal with a gun in their hand, to somebody that just needs to find out if there's a counselor in their area. So we help folks all across the country, not just put them into our treatment centers, but other treatment centers throughout the U.S. And you can give us a call, please. The number is 844-888-HELP. Again, Addiction Campuses at 844-888-4357, or go to addictioncampuses.com. And I want to thank Arlina Allen for being on High Sobriety with us today. It's been great talking with you. You had some amazing, just simple things to share. Again, you are an A-lister in my eyes, and that you've just been doing the deal for 24 years, and you just continue to get back. You continue to encourage others. So thank you for being a great role model for folks like myself. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing. It's really important. So thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, and good luck with everything that you're doing.
Okay. You have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to High Sobriety. If you or a loved one are struggling with an addiction, we can help. Call our hotline at 844-888-HELP. That's 844-888-4357. Don't wait. Call today, 844-888-HELP. High Sobriety is an Addiction Campuses podcast.